What's up, everyone, and welcome to my 2015 MLB trade deadline review video. I made one of these last year when there were far less moves, but this year I want to do one because there's a lot of stuff going on, and I've been really paying attention to all this stuff this year. Last year I was just kind of like, I'd see, Bleacher Report notification and be like, oh, John Lester got traded, cool. No, this year I've been on Twitter pretty much actively the entire last few days when these big trades have been going down. And they really started on July 23rd, which is as far back as my video will go, my coverage will go. And if you're wondering, I'm only covering the trades that are official as of 4 o'clock p.m. on the 31st, obviously, via CBSSports.com 2015 MLB Trade Tracker, which is a very useful thing. So just the late trades that are listed here, and then if anything else becomes official between now and when I refresh the page at the end of covering the trades that are already listed, are the only trades that will be discussed. So I'm going to discuss the trades in as much depth as I possibly can to my understanding, and give each team a grade based on the return for what they traded, and then give an overall winner for the trade, which is similar to what I did last year. I think I just gave a winner to the trade. So the first trade was the Astros trading Jacob Nottingham and Daniel Mengen for Scott Kazmir of the Oakland Athletics. So the Astros get another left-handed starter to put at the top of their rotation with Dallas Keuchel, who's having a phenomenal year, and he will most likely take the place of Roberto Hernandez and all the other starters that they were taking in the rotation. So if you're looking at it as you're taking Roberto Hernandez out of the rotation and you're putting Scott Kazmir in, it's an excellent trade from that perspective. And the prospects that they had to give up were not all that notable. They were good prospects, but they're not the most important prospects in the Astros system. You didn't give up like Mark Appel or anything for these players. So from the Astros' perspective, I would give this trade a B+. Scott Kazmir is an excellent starter. He will be hitting the free agent market at the end of the season, though, and that is something that they probably have in mind, as they're not going to get him back, and he's just a pure rental, which is actually probably good from the Astros' perspective anyway, due to all the highly touted prospects that they have on the way up, pitching-wise anyway. From the Athletics' perspective, you get rid of an impending free agent who is definitely going to test the market. You get more out of these players. You get more guaranteed than that supplementary round pick would have gotten you anyway. Mengen's going to be a pretty decent starter, and Nottingham, I don't know a whole lot about him, but he is down the road projected to be a good offensive catcher. And with the way the Athletics have brought up good offensive catchers such as John Jaso, Derek Norris, Stephen Vogt, and Josh Fagley over the last few years, my hopes for Nottingham would be pretty high. So for the Athletics, I'd give this haul an A- based on what they were trading. For Scott Kazmir, this is pretty good value. Not quite the best value they could have gotten. In my mind, I think they could have gotten one more prospect out of this, but they still came away with pretty good prospects out of it. Later that day, the Pirates traded Jonathan Barrios for Aramis Ramirez and cash considerations from the Brewers. Aramis Ramirez is going to retire at the end of the season, and I believe he's hitless in whatever amount of at-bats he has with the Pirates up to this point, and the last I checked anyway. But I'd still say that this trade from the Pirates' perspective is good, considering the injuries to Josh Harrison and Jordy Mercer on that left side of the infield. You do have Jung-Ho Kang, who will fill in very nicely at shortstop or third base, but then you have an open spot, and that's where Aramis Ramirez is going to slide in at third base, and then he'll assumably go to the bench unless they move Josh Harrison over to right field at the end of the season. And then you're going into the playoff with a lineup of, Pedro Alvarez, Neil Walker, Jung-Ho Kang, Aramis Ramirez, Andrew McCutchen, Starlin Marte, and Josh Harrison. That's a pretty good lineup. I'd be scared of that lineup going into the playoffs, even though the Pirates are going to yet again be a wild card team, despite probably being a 100-game winner this year. If not like a 97, 98 range. They're the second best team in the National League, in my opinion. From that perspective, I give the Pirates a C on this trade. It's not the best they probably could have gotten, but it is a solid fill-in, and it's going to be looked at as a big depth trade when the playoffs come around. Whether he starts or he comes off the bench as a pinch hitter, he will be a useful asset for them. From the Brewers' perspective, I don't really know anything about this guy. I didn't even look into his past, or not his past, but like his projections or anything. So for that reason, I'm not going to give a grade to the Brewers for this trade. I am going to declare, I forgot to give the Astros Athletics trade a winner. I give that trade, I say the Astros won that trade. It's not really winning that trade, it's just who is going to come out better right now. Who is better because of this trade? And I'd say the Astros are better because of that trade. I'd say the Pirates are better because of this trade, not giving up a prospect that I really know. So the Angels acquired Connor Gillaspie for cash considerations from the White Sox. Gillaspie has always been a great hitter against right-handers, not so great against left-handers, and he's an average at best defender. But the Angels are stocking up on depth players, as we'll see later on when I cover a couple of different trades. And Connor Gillaspie is a pretty good depth player, and he can hit, and you got the DH spot for him if you want to use that. So that's always something to keep in mind. So from that perspective, I'd say that I'd give the Angels a C on this trade. Again, depth acquisition, so there's not really, it's like the same situation as Aramis Ramirez, where you can't really judge it based on the fact that it's just depth. It's not really, it's not really going to hurt your team. So you can't give them a really good grade because it didn't help your team a whole lot, but you can't give them a really bad grade. So most of these depth acquisitions are going to get a C. And the White Sox got cash considerations. I'd give that an A because you're going to non-tender Connor Gillaspie probably at the end of the year anyway. So what's the point in keeping him around when you can get, cash to get rid of him? And you didn't get a prospect, but you're getting something. So just to get anything out of Connor Gillaspie, you get an A. So the Cardinals acquired Steve Cishek, former Marlins closer, from the Marlins for prospect pitcher Kyle Barraclough. Is that it looks like that's how you pronounce that name, but this is a decent trade for the Cardinals. I'd say you get another solid bullpen arm for the playoff run. You can never have too many bullpen arms, as the Kansas City Royals showed us last year. And the Marlins were going to non-tender Steve Cishek at the end of the year anyway. So despite me previously saying if you're going to non-tender someone, getting anything for them is good, I'd give the Marlins a D on this one. Because I honestly wouldn't have non-tendered Steve Cishek. Oh, and the Angels won that trade. If it was, I keep forgetting the trade winner. Sorry, but I give the Marlins a D on that because Steve Cishek wasn't really a no-trade candidate. He just had a rough start to the season, and after he returned from the minors, he's been very good for the Marlins. I don't know why they couldn't have kept him for a little bit longer because he probably would have passed waivers or kept him for next season when they're supposed to be competitive. Because I think the Cardinals just got a steal of a trade. I'm going to give them an A on this just because Steve Cishek not only provides value for this season, but for the future as well. Even if they non-tender and sign him to a different contract, he is a solid relief pitcher. Whether he's closing or not, he definitely won't close for the Cardinals. But to have someone with closing experience always comes through very well in the postseason. The Mets traded John Gant and Robert Whalen to the Braves in exchange for third baseman Juan Uribe and utility man Kelly Johnson, as well as cash considerations. So, let's discuss this trade a little bit. So, the Mets had a very anemic offense all year. David Wright's been out the entire season, and you've had this guy Juan Uribe available pretty much since the beginning of the season when Justin Turner took over the third base spot for the Dodgers, and Alex Guerrero had a pretty good start to the year. But the Mets, they hold out hope that David Wright's going to come back. And, he still isn't back. So you got to make a move here before the trade deadline. And they were one of the early ones. They snatched up Juan Uribe from an in-division rival. And Kelly Johnson's having one of the better seasons of his career. The best in a few years, actually. And he can play any position besides catcher, he's really like a Ben Zobrist, but not as good, let's say. He's less skilled than Ben Zobrist, but he has the same versatility. The same things that give Ben Zobrist value give Kelly Johnson value outside of hitting. But they didn't give the Mets didn't give up any game-breaking prospects or anyone that's a sure thing. So from that perspective, I'd say the Mets get a B+ for this trade. They got a solid hitter in Juan Uribe. They got a great utility man in Kelly Johnson and getting some cash. I'd say they won the trade. The Braves, I'd give a B- on this trade. They're not very good prospects you're getting back, but you are getting them for someone who's not going to be on your team next year, and someone who's the other person, Kelly Johnson, is most likely not going to be on your team next year. The Royals made a move to get the big fish in the trade deadline here as they acquired Johnny Cueto and cash considerations in exchange for 3 left-handed pitching prospects, including College World Series player Brandon Finnegan last year of World Series fame, because he played in the College World Series and the MLB World Series. Brandon Finnegan, I think, is the big piece for this trade, although John Lamb is also a fantastic prospect. I'd say that there's no winner to this trade. I'd give the Royals a B, because they're going to win the division, so they're not just getting just one start out of Johnny Cueto. They're likely getting more than one start, at least, I'd say. Probably at least 2 based on the ALDS. I doubt the Royals are going to get swept. I could see them losing in the ALDS, but I don't think they'll get swept. They're getting at least 2 starts from Johnny Cueto, if not more. And those are important come postseason time. You're going to save your bullpen a little bit, even though the Royals have arguably the best bullpen in the MLB anyway. So it's not, that big of a loss, even if they didn't get Cueto. But Cueto was the best player available, so from that perspective, you have to give the Royals at least a B. I don't think that giving up Brandon Finnegan was very good for them. The Reds, I'd give an A to this trade. Now, you might say, well, you didn't give a winner, but based on grades, the winner, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm saying the Royals got what they needed, the Reds got what they wanted. So you can't really predict the winner from that because it's all prospect-based, and the prospects they got were really good, but the pitcher they gave up was really good. So I'm not going to say there's a winner. But the Reds got a potential, I'd say, 2 to 3 starter or setup man or closer in Brandon Finnegan. He's going to be a good arm, whether it's in the bullpen or starting. So keep an eye on that. John Lamb, going to be a starter in the MLB, maybe even this year. And Cody Reed, I don't know a whole lot about him, but he's apparently supposed to be really good because they said he can start in the MLB this season, or by the end of the season. So from that perspective, the Reds, I'd give an A to this trade. The Angels acquired Shane Victorino and cash considerations in exchange for Josh Rutledge. Again, I'm not going to say there's a winner to this trade. However, if I had to pick one, I can actually pick one for this, and I'd say it's the Angels just because they got a depth acquisition for the playoffs, and if they keep him on the bench and he stays healthy, he is going to contribute to that team. And so I'd say the Angels won this trade just based on the fact that they got the better player out of the two. The Red Sox get another infielder. Dustin Pedroia is going to be out for a little bit. Josh Rutledge has MLB experience when he was with the Colorado Rockies, and we'll see what he can do with the Red Sox. The Mets traded pitching prospect Casey Meissner for reliever Tyler Clippard, who is going to be playing the setup role for the team. Now, this trade actually came before the Yenry Mejia full season suspension for PED usage. Even before that, I'd say this was an excellent trade for them. Now it's looking even better. They deal from a position of organizational depth in Casey Meissner, and they got one of the best relieving arms in the game, even if it is just through the rest of the season. They didn't give up a whole lot to acquire him. I'd give this acquisition an A. And for the Athletics, I'd give this acquisition a C. Again, you probably could have gotten a little bit more for him, and you didn't get a super highly touted prospect. But at the same point, I don't think it's all that bad. I think the haul's pretty decent for someone like Tyler Clippard. So the Blue Jays traded Jose Reyes, Miguel Castro, Jeff Hoffman, and Jesus Tinoco to the Rockies for Troy Tulowitzki and LaTroy Hawkins. Despite the fact that Johnny Cueto was the biggest fish on the trade market, Troy Tulowitzki might have been the best player traded. And let me explain why. Cueto was the biggest fish on the trade market because everyone knew that he was going to be traded. Troy Tulowitzki was an absolute wild card. No one saw this trade coming. And he is, without a doubt, in my mind, the best shortstop in Major League Baseball. And if you acquire him, you're the winner in the trade regardless. So I'd say the Blue Jays won this trade from that perspective. However, as a Blue Jays fan, I'm not a fan of giving up Miguel Castro in a trade. Now, Jeff Hoffman is a potential ace. I'm not mad about giving him up because you got one of the best players in the game. And Jeff Hoffman's going to go to Colorado, so he's probably not going to be an ace unless he is an ace with like a 3.5 ERA. And Miguel Castro is the big piece that I didn't like giving up in this trade because bullpen help is something that is in short supply for the Blue Jays this season. And I thought Miguel Castro could have come up late in the season, not like a September call-up, but maybe mid-August, and really given the team an electric arm in the bullpen. They did get LaTroy Hawkins back. He's old, of course, but he is still a very solid bullpen arm. Even pitching in Colorado, he had pretty decent numbers for Colorado. Getting Jose Reyes' contract off the books is good, but you have Troy Tulowitzki signed for even longer. Now, what that does is it sets your team up for a run in the long term because you have players like Josh Donaldson and Troy Tulowitzki and Russell Martin, who are obviously going to be great players for years to come. But Jose Reyes, I didn't think was worth the money. Troy Tulowitzki's worth every penny. From this perspective, I give the Blue Jays an A, based on the fact that they not only acquired the best shortstop in the game, but they acquired a solid relief pitcher who was going to, address an area of need. I'd give him an A. The Rockies, I give a B. Taking on Jose Reyes' contract was while necessary, kind of a big knocker in this trade. Also, the fact that you don't really know what Jesus Tinoco is going to be is projected to be, is really gives it a wild card. I think they could have got more for Troy Tulowitzki if they waited to trade him until the offseason. But at the same time, it was honestly time for him to go. He's wasting great seasons in Colorado. And even though he is playing on turf instead of altitude now, his health problems should alleviate a little bit. The problem that I'm worried about now, instead of the injuries that he's had before with his hips, is the fact that a lot of back injuries and back problems come from playing on turf, so that will be something to watch out for later in the season. The Angels continue to trade for outfielders. They made a pair of trades as they acquired David DeJesus from the Rays for Eduard Lopez and David Murphy from the Indians for Eric Stamets. As far as the Angels and the Rays, I'd give a D to the Rays because David DeJesus was not a player that they needed to give up. He could have helped them, especially since they're almost within wildcard contention. They're only 2 games below 500. And David DeJesus was going to help them out this year in getting to that. I'd say the Angels won that trade. I'd give them a B. David DeJesus is a pretty good player. Eric Stamets, pretty good prospect in the Angels system, however, very expendable. And the Angels got a great left-handed bat from the Indians in David Murphy. He can really platoon very well, and I think that's something that they kind of need. They needed a lot of help in left field, and now they got 3 different platoon options in DeJesus, Murphy, and Victorino, giving them a lot of options. And so from that perspective, I give the Angels the grade of A for these 2 transactions, and I give the Indians a B for getting Eric Stamets back. However, overall, I'd give the people that the Indians traded with a C, just because these weren't players they necessarily needed to trade. Although the Indians, from that perspective, makes a lot more sense because David Murphy was probably not going to stick around. The Royals traded Sean Manaea and Aaron Brooks for Ben Zobrist and cash considerations. I'd say the Royals won this trade, however, not by much. Ben Zobrist is really going to help them out in any area that they need. From left field to right field, second base, he can play a little third if you want him to. He can really spot a lot of guys days off. And he's going to help out a lot in the postseason with his versatility. He can really move around the lineup wherever he needs to be. He'll most likely play right field in Alex Rios' spot, but with Alex Gordon out, he is going to fill in there most likely in the meantime. The Athletics give very good prospects in return, however, though. Aaron Brooks is very MLB ready, and he could probably play as early as this season. And Sean Manaea projects as a very good long-term starter. So, the Athletics I'm going to give an A, but the Royals I'm also going to give an A. This is a very well-matched trade, and I think both teams got exactly what they needed out of this. The Nationals traded for the best reliever on the market in Jonathan Papelbon. They also acquired cash in exchange for pitcher Nick Pivetta. The Phillies get an F for this trade. Papelbon did have that vesting option. Oh, for the Royals trade, I'm going to give the Royals the win on that one over the Athletics. Even though the prospects the Athletics got are really good. I think Zobrist is a very, very underrated player. But back to the Nationals acquiring Papelbon. I give the Phillies an F, because they could have gotten a lot more for Papelbon if they waited a little bit longer until the offseason and traded him and swallowed their pride, or not their pride, but swallowed their issues they were going to face if they didn't trade him due to his colorful personality. They could have gotten a lot more from him, because instead of a rough 2-year contract, that would have been an expiring, and it would have gained so much more value. So the way this trade worked was Jonathan Papelbon has had this really rough vesting option for 2016, where if he finishes a certain number of games, he will earn $13 million in 2016, and that turned a lot of teams off to trading for him. However, the Nationals were okay with acquiring that on the condition that it was lowered, and it immediately became guaranteed. So instead of earning $13 next year, he will earn $11 million, and the contract becomes fully guaranteed. The Phillies will cover the rest of this year's deal, so the only thing that the Nationals are on the hook on is next year's salary for Jonathan Papelbon. So, and the prospect that the Phillies got back is someone that I've never even heard of, and I spend quite a bit of time scouting Baseball America and MLB.com and things of that nature for the top prospects. I've probably heard of him, but he's not one of the higher ranked prospects in the national system, and I think that you could have gotten a little bit more for Papelbon despite the fact that he is just a reliever. On a minor move, the Pirates acquired Joe Blanton from the Royals. That gives them a little bit of depth. Another minor move, the Yankees acquired Dustin Ackley from the Mariners. Dustin Ackley is a decent defender. That's just about the only thing he can do, though. From that perspective, I give the Yankees a D. I don't think that he's very good to give up prospects for. And for the Mariners, I give them a C. They acquired Jose Ramirez, a pretty decent prospect, and Ramon Flores, who was actually pretty decent as well. So I'd give that trade to the Mariners just for getting some sort of prospects for Dustin Ackley, who's pretty much a bust at this point. I'm pretty ready to call it. The Giants acquired Mike Leake in exchange for infield prospect Adam Duvall and pitcher Curie Mella. This trade is really, I'm going to have to wait to give this trade a grade until years later, because it depends on how Adam Duvall pans out. Let me check his age. I remember Adam Duvall used to be one of their top prospects in the Giants system, but I don't remember how old he is now. And he actually had a pretty rough year in the MLB last year. Trying to see where his age is. Oh, okay, so he's 26 years old. He's going to be 27 by the season's end, which means next year he's going to be 27. So unless he can have a breakout year within the next couple of years, I don't really think that he was a great player to acquire. I'm actually going to change my mind on this trade. I'm going to give this trade to the Giants. I give them a B for getting Mike Leake. They're definitely not going to sign him back. Almost definitely not going to sign him back. But they didn't give up a whole lot to acquire him. I didn't realize Adam Duvall was that old now. And the Reds, I'll give a C. Adam Duvall could be good. I haven't heard of the other guys, so it's hard to judge. Overall, I give the trade to the Giants. The Cardinals traded Rob Comiskey for Brandon Moss of the Indians. He gives them a left-handed platoon option. Once Matt Holliday comes back, they can play him at first base with Mark Reynolds, or just by himself, really. I give this trade to the Indians, though, because they got one of the Cardinals' top prospects in exchange for someone they weren't going to re-sign. They had one more year of arbitration, but someone who's not really useful to them, considering he only has one more year on the team, and then he's probably going to go to free agency because the Indians won't want to overpay for him. They get a very controllable arm to go with the players they already have, like Bauer, Salazar, Carrasco, and Kluber. And Brandon Moss brought back a good bit of value for them. I'm going to give the Indians an A and give the Cardinals a B, and by that the Indians will win the trade. Brandon Moss is a good player, not great. He's had a down season, and that definitely factors into why I'm giving the Cardinals a little bit less of a grade. If it was just Rob Comiskey for Brandon Moss, and Brandon Moss has been having a year like he was the last couple years with Oakland, I would have definitely given the the trade would have been a draw. The Pirates acquired Joakim Soria for Jacoby Jones. I give that to the Pirates. I give the Tigers a C just because they probably weren't going to be able to retain Soria. And the Pirates a B because they got a pretty good reliever for their bullpen. A 3-team trade occurred between the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Marlins. Let's start first with what the Marlins acquired. The Marlins acquired minor league pitchers Jeff Brigham, Victor Araujo, and Kevin Guzman. I give the Marlins an F because out of all the pieces moved in this trade, they got almost nothing. Even though they did dump a good bit of salary in the players that they traded, which we'll go over when we get to the Dodgers, I don't think that the Marlins are very smart in the way they went about all this. The Braves acquired Cuban infielder Hector Oliveira, left-handed relief pitcher Paco Rodriguez, who's currently injured, prospect pitcher Zach Bird, and a competitive balance pick from Miami, which just adds to why Miami got an F for this trade, and that projects to be the number 35 pick in the draft. The Braves get Hector Oliveira for a fraction of what they were going to pay him, considering that the $64 million that he got in the offseason, $28 million came in form of a signing bonus that the Dodgers have already paid, so they're getting good value for the most likely third baseman, and they're probably going to get 5 good years out of him. He's already 30, but if he plays until he's 35 and he gives them solid production, that's good because he, gave him something through the rebuild, and they might even flip him again for even more. Paco Rodriguez is a pretty good pitcher. He just can't keep himself healthy. And I don't know much about Zachary Bird. I give the Braves a C+. I want to give them a B, but at the same time, I see what they gave up, and I don't want to give them that grade. But from the perspective of getting Oliveira and Paco Rodriguez and a draft pick, I'd give them a C+. So, let's move on to the Dodgers, as they acquired a lot of pieces coming back in this trade. Matt Latos and Alex Wood are going to join the rotation for them. Jim Johnson and Luis Avilan are going to join the bullpen. Michael Morse is going to sit on the bench. And for the minors, they got Jose Peraza. They also take on the contract of Bronson Arroyo, who is currently injured. However, he might be able to come back this season, and if that 5th starter spot still isn't filled for the Dodgers, he could definitely be a candidate for it for the rest of the regular season. I give the Dodgers an A+. I think this was easily the best single-team haul out of any trade in the entire trade deadline, up to this point anyway. And that is closely seconded by Troy Tulowitzki. So, the Dodgers, I think, got a number 3 and 4 starter. Alex Wood is a now asset. He is not going to be playing in 5 years, probably. He's going to blow his elbow out. If you've never seen Alex Wood pitch, he has one of the weirdest deliveries that makes you wonder how the hell he's not injuring himself every year. He has already had Tommy John surgery as an amateur, and it's a big elbow concern for him. However, if he stays healthy for the next, say, 3 years and then starts to have elbow issues, the Dodgers will most likely have a World Series title in that time. Matt Latos is going to be a free agent at season's end, although I wouldn't discount the Dodgers from being able to re-sign him. He's a fantastic pitcher. He had a rough start to the year when he was most likely injured before going on the DL. And then when he came off the DL, he's had a really good year since then. So I'd bank on Matt Latos having a good year for the rest of the year. Jim Johnson's had a bounce-back year. He is definitely a fantastic reliever when he can exhibit more control. Luis Avilan has had a couple down seasons since his 2013 year. However, I think he's a solid reliever, and he can really rebound. Michael Morse, if they keep him and don't release him, is going to be solid bench depth. He can play left and right field and first base, and he offers quite a bit of power. And Jose Peraza is probably going to be a good prospect. He slots in at second base currently. I don't know if the Dodgers really have a second base prospect, but Howie Kendrick is not getting younger. The Astros acquired Carlos Gomez and Mike Fiers from the Milwaukee Brewers, as well as cash for Brett Phillips, Domingo Santana, Josh Hader, and Adrian Hauser. I give the Astros a B on this trade, or B- rather. I think Carlos Gomez is overrated, personally. He's still a good player, but I just think he's overrated by the general public as a superstar player. I don't think he's a superstar player. Mike Fiers is a good pitcher, not great. He will help out the rotation because they can now send Vincent Velasquez or Colin McHugh out of the rotation. I don't know if Vincent Velasquez is actually pitching, but I don't think Colin McHugh has had a very good year by any stretch of the imagination. And so I'd say from that perspective, I give the Astros a B-. They got what they needed. Jake Marisnick has been a pretty poor defender in center field, or a pretty good defender, but pretty poor hitter in center field. So if you're looking at it from just the sheer fact that they upgraded at a position of need, and considering George Springer most likely isn't going to be back for the postseason, I'd say it's a pretty good trade for them. The Brewers, however, got 2 great outfield prospects in Brett Phillips and Domingo Santana. I think Domingo Santana could be the next 35 home run hitter in the MLB. Not only not the next, but he can be a 35 home run hitter in the MLB. And Brett Phillips, I've also heard, has that potential too. I'm going to give them a B+, just because I haven't heard of these pitching prospects, so I can't accurately judge them. And I'd say out of this, the Brewers won this trade. And if it wasn't obvious before, the Dodgers won their 3-team trade by a mile. The Blue Jays finally got an ace. They acquired left-hander David Price in exchange for 3 other left-handers, Daniel Norris, Jairo LeBeau, and Matt Boyd. Now, the interesting thing is that David Price and Johnny Cueto, who were the top 2 rentals on the market, went for exactly the same price. 3 left-handed pitching prospects, including 1 potential top-of-the-line starter. Daniel Norris has ace stuff, ace potential. He had an excellent season in the minors last year. He just hasn't put it together this year. He had a 5 FIP in the MLB, and he has not been very good at the minor league level this year. He's been good, but not Daniel Norris level of being good and dominating, potentially. And Matt Boyd, he was very bad in the MLB this year, but at the minor league level, he's had a fantastic career, not just even this season. And I think he can project as a back-end starter for the Tigers in the near future. I give the Tigers a B+. I don't know about this other pitching prospect, but the other 2 they got were fantastic. And I give the Blue Jays a B. So from that perspective, I actually give the Blue Jays a win just because they got an ace and they needed a really good pitcher for the top end of the rotation, considering that they're still starting Felix Doubront as of the other day. And R.A. Dickey probably should be removed from the rotation, but I don't see that happening. So now their rotation projects in the playoff series is David Price, Mark Burley, R.A. Dickey, and then most likely Drew Hutchison after that. So from that, I guess, you can look at it as a win for the Blue Jays. I'd say the Blue Jays won this trade, and that's not just me speaking as a fan of the team. I think they got the best player out of it. And they did give up a potential ace, but they are a built-to-win-now team, even though they do have a few players who are retainable long-term. I'd say that the more likely time for them to contend is the next 2 years. So even though David Price expires after this year, I'd still say very solid trade for the Tigers and the Blue Jays, but the Blue Jays got the better end of it just barely. The Rangers acquired Cole Hamels, an ace, and Jake Diekman, a okay bullpen arm, from the Phillies for Matt Harrison and Jake Thompson, as well as prospects Jorge Arfalo, Nick Williams, Jared Eichhoff, and Alec Asher. The big thing about this trade is that the Rangers gave up 3 potential, very good starters in Alfaro, Williams, and Thompson, and they gave up the contract to Matt Harrison. I think that's more to make a money match than anything else. And the Phillies can kind of use him as a reclamation project during their rebuild. Guys like Matt Harrison, who were on good contracts when they first got signed but have been susceptible to injury issues, are actually kind of the perfect guys for rebuilding teams to have, even if they're on bad contracts, because they can pitch well for the bad team and then be flipped for more assets later on. So from that perspective, I actually think the Phillies made out good with Matt Harrison. And overall, I actually give the Phillies an A for this trade. They got Thompson, Alfaro, and Williams, as well as these other 2 pitching prospects I haven't heard of, plus someone who can help them through their rebuild. I give them an A minus, though, not an A, just an A minus. And I'll give the Rangers a B because they did acquire an ace and a decent bullpen arm. Their bullpen's been kind of shaky this year. But, they gave up a little bit too much for Cole Hamels, I thought. I definitely think that Cole Hamels' value would have gone way down in the offseason, considering that players like Jordan Zimmerman and David Price and Johnny Cueto are going to hit the free agent market. So I think that the Rangers kind of jumped the gun to get the ace, who's the controllable guy, instead of having to convince a free agent to come there. But I think they gave up a little bit too much, even from that perspective. The Orioles acquired Gerardo Parra for Zach Davies. The big debate going into the deadline, one of the big debates anyway, was whether or not... Hold on. One of the big debates going into the deadline was whether or not the Orioles were going to be sellers or buyers, and it looks like they're buyers. Gerardo Parra will play in the corner, most likely, where he had 15 defensive run saves plus in 2013 for the Arizona Diamondbacks in a hitter's park, no less. And Zach Davies is not a high-end prospect for the Orioles. from that perspective, I give the Orioles a B, and I give the Brewers a C. The Orioles win this trade just because they got an MLB-ready corner outfield bat for them, and their push for the playoffs down the stretch. It's worth noting that even though the Blue Jays are the big players in the trade season, that the Orioles are actually in second place in the American League East and have the inside track on the second wild card spot, just behind the Minnesota Twins, who have been faltering lately. The Blue Jays traded Rob Rasmussen, Nick Wells, and Jacob Brents to the Mariners for reliever Mark Lowe, who's having a phenomenal year. He's had a 1 earned run average out of the bullpen in 36 innings this year. I give the Blue Jays a B. They addressed their bullpen finally, which was a big concern coming down the stretch. Even though Mark Lowe doesn't have a very good track record for bullpen success, I think that he will keep up this dominant season even in the hitter's park that is the Rogers Center. The Mariners, I give a D. I don't think they needed to trade Mark Lowe, and I don't think they needed to trade him for Rob Rasmussen of all prospects, or all minor leaguers. So I give the Blue Jays the win on this one. The Mariners really didn't need to make this move. I didn't think anyway. The Twins got Kevin Jepsen from the Rays for Chi Wei-Hu and Alexi Tapia. I give the win to the Twins on this one, but I don't give it to them by much. I give them a C+, and I give the Rays a C. I think Kevin Jepsen's an overrated reliever, and I think the Rays capitalized on his value, but not to a point that they probably could have. Just from the perspective of the fact that the Twins got a bullpen arm for their weak bullpen, I give them the win on this one. And this is not even probably a trade worth mentioning, but it's funny nonetheless. The Blue Jays got cash considerations in exchange for Felix Doubront. He's headed to the Oakland Athletics, so I just think that's kind of funny. And there's actually a few more trades that have been added, trades that I read about but hadn't been considered official yet, including a really big one before the deadline actually ended. So Ben Revere and cash considerations are heading to the Blue Jays in exchange for Alberto Torrado and Jimmy Cordero. I don't think the Phillies needed to trade Ben Revere from that perspective, and the prospects they got were bad, so from that perspective, give them an F. But the Blue Jays also really didn't need to trade for Ben Revere because, well, he's going to be playing left field most likely. He does give them a leadoff hitter, though, and I give them a C+. He doesn't really... They didn't need another offensive. They didn't need another hitter. The left field kind of platoon that they had going on with Chris Colabello and, well, that wasn't really a platoon, but, you know, their depth pieces like Danny Valencia and Chris Colabello were good enough that they didn't need to add the, ninth hitter in their lineup that they needed, in theory. Although Danny Valencia will most likely go play first base along with Chris Colabello. And Ben Revere is a left-handed hitter, so... I give the Phillies an F and the Blue Jays a C+. It's really not a good trade either way, I don't think. But the Blue Jays win the trade just by default of getting a Major League ready bat. The Cubs traded for Dan Herron from the Miami Marlins. They traded Elliot Solo and Ivan Piniero. I'd give the win to the Cubs on that. Just they got another veteran for their locker room and really help out the young guys. Hopefully they can make a push to re-sign him, like they did after they traded Jason Hamill last year and they signed him back. The Marlins, I give a C. They got something back for Dan Herron. The Cubs, I give an A. Dan Herron's a solid veteran. I really like Dan Herron. He can help out the rotation, too. I give the win to the Cubs on that. And then the final trade, a huge trade for the Tigers and the Mets. The Mets acquired Yoenis Cespedes, and the Tigers acquired Michael Fulmer and Luis Cessa. So Michael Fulmer is actually one of the higher rated prospects in the Mets farm system outside of obviously the big guys like Matz and Syndergaard. He was one of the top pitchers in their farm this year. They did actually manage to hold on to Rafael Montero in this trading season, which I'm surprised that they did, and I'm surprised that even happened. So, yeah, that's it. That's all the trade. Oh, Mets give an A just for acquiring a bat at all. I give the trade to the Mets. The Tigers, I give a B to this trade, but I'd say the winner of the trade is the Mets. I'm kind of scrolling through to see if anything is kind of being talked about. So it looks like I'm on Twitter, so none of this is official. I'm not going to cover it either. Padres acquire Mark Repchinski. That sounds like a good deal for the Padres. Pirates acquire J.A. Happ from the Mariners. That'll really help their rotation down the stretch. Tommy Hunter went to the Cubs. That's pretty good. He sucked at home, but he was really good on the road. The Dodgers traded Michael Morse to the Pirates for Jose Tabata, so that really, is better for the Dodgers, and they even got more. Let's see. I'll keep going. I don't really see a whole lot else happening. Oh wow, the Cubs actually traded Junior Lake. That was what they got. Tommy Hunter for Junior Lake. That's a pretty interesting trade for the Orioles. I think Junior Lake's good. I just think that he's had a couple of down years. Ryan Cook is headed to the Red Sox. Not really seeing a whole lot. Other than that, alright. Well, that's going to do it. So, overall trade deadline winners, I'd say the teams that really came out ahead of this deadline. Now, winning the deadline does not mean they're teams I'm going to think or win the World Series. So I'd say out of this deadline, the Royals came out ahead. The Blue Jays really came out ahead. The Pirates had a smart trading season. The Dodgers got the really big trade to go their way. They got the best single team haul out of any team, I think. The Astros made a couple of solid acquisitions. And then teams I think lost the deadline are teams like the Cardinals, who traded a top pitching prospect for Brandon Moss, who's he's an above average player, but he's probably not super important to them once Matt Adams and Matt Holliday come back, which will most likely be later on in the season. And the Angels got a lot of depth pieces. They're another one who kind of won the deadline. Oh, and the Mets for getting Tyler Clippard and Yoenis Cespedes and Juan Uribe. But, I don't really think a whole lot of teams came out behind in this deadline. I think a lot of the trades that were made were very smart, and even if, like the Phillies made a bad trade for Ben Revere, but they made a really good trade for Cole Hamels, so who knows how that'll all work out. But I think that the overall winner of the trade deadline could be considered the Blue Jays. They got an ace, a bullpen arm, and 2 bats for their lineup. Even though they didn't need bats for their lineup, they're very good bats nonetheless to have in Ben Revere and Troy Tulowitzki. So I'd say that even though, and they got rid of Felix Doubront too. So I'd say the Blue Jays won the deadline, and I'd say that the Mets and the Dodgers are in a close second. So that wraps up my trade deadline coverage for this year. If there's anything else that I want to discuss, I'll make sure to cover it in a separate video. But thank you guys for watching. Even if you didn't watch at all, thank you for watching anyway. I know this was very long, but there was a lot of stuff to cover. And I will see you guys in a few days when I resume posting videos of the Indians franchise. I got to get to work on the offseason right now. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you later.